Thank you for having us here. We're thrilled, and I'm very excited to be on stage with Mike, who's the CTO of Deliveroo, and talk to you a little bit about the CTO's role in supercharging growth, especially in consumer companies. So Mike has been with Deliveroo for a year and a half, and he has a very unique background. Mike left high school at 15, started and sold a company at the age of 22, was then with Facebook for 5 years, roughly, right? Yeah. In the last 2.5 years there, he was running their ads product team that was post-IPO. And now we're absolutely thrilled to have him at Deliveroo. Since he joined a year and a half ago, he increased the team in engineering and product from 100 to 300. So we'll talk about that and recruiting a little bit later. But tell us a little bit, Mike, what are the key areas where you and your team help with growth?
Well, a lot of what we do is just make sure that the service, I think that the best way to grow is to offer consistently good service to people. Mm-hmm. So we spend a lot of time on making sure that we have the right number of riders on the road, that we can predict when the food is ready, and that we're dispatching orders and getting them to people on time. And so we spend a ton of time on that. Recently, we've also started working a lot on marketing, both in terms of doing incrementality testing of all the marketing that we do, online and offline, so that we understand what works and how we can invest money most efficiently. And increasingly, we're just like automating all parts of like CRM and performance marketing.
So it's quite interesting. It sounds like your marketing team is quite close to the engineering team, which is not always the case. And I believe it's a more recent evolution.
Yeah, it's something that we changed just in the last couple of months.
And how is that going? Are you finding that helpful? Is it because it's much more tech-driven and analytical, or?
It goes both ways, I think. I think the marketing team always wants the engineering team to build things, and the engineering team always wants to build things that are really scalable and wants the marketing team to like measure what they're doing more and think about incrementality and all these kind of things. And so I think if they're not sitting next to each other and they're not managed to similar goals, you kind of like end up talking past each other a lot. Mm-hmm. And so we started by just getting everybody to sit next to each other.
Interesting. So physically,
like
in
physically
the office,
in the same
marketing,
pods.
Engineering, product.
Yeah, so like you'd have a pod of like 6 desks, and you'd have like 2 engineers, a designer, and like some content writers like doing CRM, for example.
Interesting.
So we did that for a couple months. We started moving much faster. Started getting better results, and then we made some organizational changes afterwards to kind of like formalize parts of that relationship.
Okay, so it sounds like you've been very busy. The other area that I wanted to talk to you about, and I'll give you the background for this question, and I hope it's helpful to everyone in the audience, is hiring. Every time I meet a CEO or a CTO, they tell me it's really hard to scale the engineering team, probably our bar is too high, that's why we haven't increased the team. However, you have increased the team from 100 to 300 in under a year and a half, and I know for a fact it's not because the bar is low, the bar is very high. Do you have any tips? I know that's something quite timely.
Well, I think that one of the first things that I did when I joined was I went to find somebody to lead recruiting. So we have an internal recruiting team. We hired somebody really amazing who I knew from Facebook. He helped build the Facebook London office. He was at Google, he was at Twitter doing engineering recruiting there. And he joined, and we already had one in-house recruiter working on engineering. This other person joined, and their job changed from recruiting engineers to recruiting recruiters. And then we built up a recruiting team, and then that recruiting team turned around and started targeting engineers. We were very careful and very strategic about who we went after. We generally went after senior candidates with experience at scale, but we also have made a real effort to find well-known subject matter experts in certain areas who people want to work with. And so we'll grab somebody who has like a real following, who like people would really want to work with, and then that person becomes an attractor for people in that field. And the other thing that we've done, which I think has been really important, is we've scaled engineering management quite a bit. We've given the engineering managers and engineering directors we've hired a lot of responsibility for growing their own teams.
Interesting. So there are a bunch of takeaways. First of all, you have an internal recruiting team for your engineering and product team.
Yep.
How big is that team now?
Well, that team now has changed to be the recruiting team for the entire company. So we've taken the engineering and product team and given them responsibility for overall recruiting. So I think it's about a dozen people now.
And at what point is it relevant for the companies here, you think, in terms of size of the team, to think about having someone internally to recruit for the engineering part?
I think that's a really hard answer. I mean, I think, at the time we had basically 1 or 2 internal recruiters, and then we were relying a lot on external agencies. And the thing about external agencies is like the quality of your outreach is incredibly variable if you're not working with one exclusively. So like, you'll have one engineer who fits your target profile who has probably been contacted like 5 times by people claiming to represent your company.
Yeah.
And some of those people are like not very good, and so they lose respect really quickly, I think, for
I see.
what you're trying to do. So if you're serious about scaling the team, I think it's an investment worth making.
Mm-hmm.
But again, just like with engineers or designers or anybody else, like there's high variability in terms of the quality of recruiters. So you have to be really careful to get somebody who knows what they're talking about and people would want to talk to.
How do you feel about referrals within the engineering team? I know that a lot of people scale that way to a certain level, and then I guess it becomes hard. Is that how you did it earlier at Deliveroo as well?
Yeah, we use referrals a lot. I think one of the dangers with referrals is they lead to a lack of diversity. Obviously
Totally
a lack
agree.
of gender diversity and ethnic diversity, but also a lack of like intellectual diversity, and all 3 of those things are really important.
Yeah.
So I think if you solely rely on referrals, you end up with a real monoculture, and that's really bad. Very early on, I think it's very useful, especially if you can get people who have been working together for a long time, they know each other. That's like a very efficient way to get started. We bought a company called Maple a little while ago who, their team has worked together. It's like their engineering team is like 10 people, and they probably work together, a combined like 60 years or something. And they just like, they're just like, they just go. Like,
they read each other's minds.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's amazing.
I can imagine that. And also on the topic of recruiting, but on the topic of recruiting an actual CTO, I know we have a lot of CEOs and entrepreneurs in the audience. It's a difficult and broad question, but are there any particular aspects of the job that CEOs should focus on when recruiting? I mean, obviously it's the full package, but are there a couple of things that you would say, hey, in a high growth startup without having these qualities or this thing on your CV, it's just going to be very difficult for the CTO to be successful?
I think the CTO is like a very malleable role, so I think there are lots of different types of CTOs, and the way that responsibility is shared between a CTO and a VP of engineering and a VP of product and so on and so forth, changes a lot from company to company. My own personal style is I try to, well, I don't really do anything anymore, so like I try to have credibility with, all of like product design, engineering, et cetera, and I think that breadth of experience is really important. I think it's very easy to get somebody who feels like their job is simply to deliver code that works. And, I think you really want somebody who understands that the definition of code that works is not just that it compiles and that it runs without errors, but that it actually helps move the business forward. And I think a lot of folks in engineering roles don't think about that aspect of what they're building, and I think that's a mistake.
That's really helpful. How about management skills? Is it important to test for that when you're hiring a CTO?
Definitely, because like as you scale the organization, I think like most of the job becomes like organizational design. It becomes like, what rituals you introduce to tell people what you care about, how you do reviews, how you talk to the organization. Like, it very quickly, like raw ability to just like write code becomes completely irrelevant, right?
I would love to chat more with Mike. Unfortunately, I've been instructed not to go over time. So thank you so much for listening to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for joining.